can you pause your voice? Thank you, Meenakshi. So, namaste everyone and welcome to today's Chiranjeev Gurukuls Sammelan. For those who are new to the Chiranjeev Gurukul is a learning platform where we aim to create leaders to transform this world using the power of Bharatiya Shastra or eternal Indian wisdom. Chiranjeev Gurukul Sammelan is an initiative by CG community to inspire, inform, and grow. The purpose of the Sammelan is to bring forth the contemporary value of eternal Indian wisdom through interactive and engaging learning sessions that open our eyes to the application of Indian wisdom. Today, we have gathered together to celebrate International Women's Day with an exciting discussion with diverse and distinguished panel of speakers. But before we start, let us do our regular invocation. I would request everyone to please close your eyes. Focus on your breath. We would chant Omkar for 3 times and do our invocation. Om. Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Everyone can come back. So namaste and welcome again. Very excited to start today's Sammelan. So before we go to our panel, Swapna ji, Eka ji and Rajiv ji, I would request Rajesh, co-founder of Chiranjeev Gurukul, to please come and introduce our panel. Dhanyawad.
Yes. So namaste to all. Swagat hai sabhi ka. And I'm sure we are all excited for one more edition of CG Sammelan. This is a monthly meetup for all of us. I look forward to each one of these and I wait for it with, bated breath, lots of excitement. And almost every time is a special one because it doesn't matter if whether you are a seeker, you are a teacher, you are a practitioner, there is so much to learn in Bharatiya Shastra. So I'm going to share just 2 thoughts here and then introduce Swapna, who in turn will bring in the panel. Okay, but first of all, I want to thank all of you because you are the CG community that enables others beyond those who are already in the community to know more and more about what's happening in Indian wisdom and how we are discussing and bringing and adapting Bharatiya Shastra to modern times. Ye bahut zaruri hai. So please remember this. You can enjoy, but ensure that others also benefit. So I'm going to request each of you next time, please share it, pass it along. Okay? Here are the 2 thoughts. So as always, and you can see when we said celebrating International Women's Day, which was yesterday. So as always, सारे भारत में बहुत सारे कंपनियां they celebrate International Women's Day. Okay, and naturally, I was also part of one. Now, very important is that, and I'm going to share what I shared yesterday. So while International Women's Day celebrates womanhood, Bharat mein womanhood is not a person. Bharat mein womanhood is an energy. That's why everything that creates, nurtures, takes care, nourishes is feminine. All right? And everything that protects, acts, all of the other elements is masculine. Now, these are two energies. So what I mentioned yesterday is in Bharat, International Women's Day does not mean celebration of womanhood, the person, but of that, the energy. And so when we've been celebrating from? Since the start of the universe itself, because the start of the universe was about the creation of the primal energy. Oh, creation bhi nahi hai, but from whatever we call as the start of the universe. So for us, female, feminine energy has been right from the beginning, and not from 1909 when International Women's Day was even conceived, because it's come from the US, of course, has started celebrating in the last couple of decades. That's one thought. Second thought, okay, so why are we doing this? What is CG Sammelan about? So there is a very popular, of course, there will be more elaboration on what is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, but that we will learn. But there is a very popular saying, a mantra, if you will, from the Rig Veda. And you must have, several of you may have heard it. It says, Ano Bhadraha Kratvo Yantu Vishwataha. Right? And here, when we say Bhadraha Kratvo, we are talking about noble thoughts, and let it come from all over the universe to us. So Bharat has always welcomed inspiration from around the globe. So naturally, we have to also and happily celebrate International Women's Day, a particular day, right? And nothing wrong with it. Best practices can come from anywhere, thoughts can go. But we must also remember the same Rig Veda has also another mantra, which says, Dure Drushyam Gruva Pathim Atharyum, which says that let thoughts also flow, emanate from us and flow everywhere in the world. है ना? So ये दूसरा part जो है, ये भी जरूरी है. Let's not only remember the first one, because we do much more of the first part or have done. But I think it has just begun to shift now. I have never advocated that we substitute all that's, Western with Indian or Eastern. But let there be a good balance, and based on the merit of it, you observe. Okay, so same is true for CG Sammelan. Aap suniye, not compulsory, you must agree with everything. But you will hear beautiful, wonderful ideas emanating from our three members of the panel today. Okay, all three wonderful friends, let me call them Mitra rather than Dost, because it has that word Mitra has a special place in my heart. Anyways, so Rajiv, Eka, and Swapna Lekha. So Swapna, besides being an author and a speaker, more importantly, is a dear friend and someone who is passionate about learning as much as the teaching, sharing, and so on. And that is what I value the most, because वो learn jab karti hai, and she will not say this about herself. Learn jab karti hai, she makes sure that she notes it, absorbs it, and really takes it in such a way that it can be shared later with everyone all around. ये जो habit है ये बहुत जरूरी है. So hence we call her lovingly the principal, right? Because of the discipline she brings in, both in learning and sharing. So we have given this principal the job of the moderator. Who can do it better? Because when thoughts will flow from Rajiv and Eka, you will have so much. Ek explosion ho jayega, right? So we have to just kind of ensure that we can capture the best out of it. So over to you, Swapna, and we look forward so much to listen to you, dear Rajiv and Eka. Over to you, Swapna, and enjoy, dear folks. Take whatever you can and try and put some of them to, application. Yes, namaste.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Rajesh. I'll try to swing in between the principal and the student role effectively to do the moderator's job today. But to everyone here, Sammelan mein aap sabhi ka swagat hai. Namaste. So welcome to Sammelan. And the subject today for discussion is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and how do we actually inform our everyday life with this principle. So, dear friends, it's my pleasure. It's my proud privilege actually to bring Rajiv and Eka and share this actually forum with them, because here are two individuals. Some little details about them, you found it while the slides were on over there, but I'll add the little other bits which are important. Is that Rajiv has experience of leading organizations and actually putting to practice what he will speak today. And that's probably what we would value him the most for. Because not only is he knowledgeable, he's equally articulate and also talks about the lived experience that he brings from his long, illustrious career. So thank you so much, Rajiv, for joining in over here. The same with Eka. The same applies to her knowledge, articulation, her willingness to come and share at forums where there are others like me who are eager to learn. And to add to that, she has she curates Akhyan, which I think is the most important bit since 2014, which is she curates a whole program around mythology, and we can say that she's the top mythologist of the country. So thank you so much, Eka, for joining in over here. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So let me just take, first, let me speak to the audience also. Remember, this is a Sammelan. जहां सब सम्मिलित होते हैं. So it is very important that you also participate in the discussion. I know there are limitations of our being on an online forum, but please feel free to put in your questions, thoughts, even if there are overarching questions which you have in mind, which nobody has. I mean, we haven't still started discussing, but put it over there. I'll keep an eye on the chats and I'll make sure that I put it to the panel over here. And if I forget, I'm sure the younger brigade with Upasana and Aditi over here will make sure that I present it to the panel so that they can opine about it, whatever we have to. So let me just take a few minutes to set the context and the agenda so that you know what we are looking forward to. So since this phrase, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, is a very profound phrase, and it's been used way too often now in a way that we kind of just say it without actually feeling it in our hearts what it really means. And that it is a very important value to us it's evident that it's engraved in the entrance hall of the Parliament of our country. And Dr. Radhakrishnan, from what I read, was the one who kept on talking about it. And now, as Rajesh has just mentioned, the G20 presidency also is led with the same spirit. So, but we need to understand, where is this Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam coming from? So it comes from the Maha Upanishad, and Maha Upanishad would mean that comes from the Vedantic philosophy. And to just suffice it in a line, what does the Vedanta say is that everything is a part of one, which we call the Brahman. So everything, every living, non-living, animate, inanimate, everything is Brahman. So this is the core philosophy which informs, and I'll just tell you what the shlok says. It says that Ayam Nijaha, that means ye mera hai. And paro veti, ye paraye ka hai. Ganana, Ganana means counting, but here it means calculating. To calculate such a thing कि ये मेरा है, ये उसका है, is laghu chetasam. Laghu means chota, small. This is something that small-minded people think of. And when I think of this shlok, I also say that our rishis and acharyas were such psychologists, they would know how to sell the idea to us. Do any of us want to be small-minded? No. We all want to be what? Very generous-hearted. So the second line goes is that udar charitana, jo udar charit ke hai, for them Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So do we all want to be udar charitana? Yes. So the entire idea of the Sammelan today is how do we actually inform our lives with Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, because we all want to be udar charitra. We don't want to be small-minded people. And see if in case this is what our country represents, isn't it something that we're really living it by? Today, these days, India is, I think we have become a nation which is generous with not just resources, but knowledge and the rest of it. So that is about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. But since we are at the close of the heels of International Women's Day, and women is gender, and it's a part of the DEI mandate, and we need to come in touch reality also. So I'll just talk about what diversity, inclusion, and equity means so that all of us are on the same page when we are talking about this. So diversity is, nature is diverse. Think about a forest. Let's think about the Amazonian rainforest. 40,000 plants. There are 3,000 forms of fishes, 400 kinds of reptiles, 400 kinds of 1,300 kind of insects. I was just reading about it. Huge number of species cohabiting, living together. No DEI officer is required over there, and they coexist in harmony, complete respect to one another. That is diversity. Now, inclusion is the experience of diversity. So when in organizations we're talking about, this is about the experience that people have, that are they feeling included. So it gives me another. In Amazon, there are so many species, but we don't know how many are there. We're still finding more and more and more. So similarly, in the DEI space, in the workplace today, we are still finding that there are more and more and more kind of people, which I think is such a foolhardy run, because every human being is unique. Every individual is unique. So inclusion is about, first, in diversity, current organizations are putting buckets in which to put people, and inclusion is the experience that these people have. And when these two don't work out right, and we do not become diverse, then comes a concept of equity. Equity is informed by the idea of fairness, justice. Is everybody getting a fair deal or not? So let me just give you an example. If in case there's an exam and all of us are supposed to get just 1 hour for that, there'll be some of us who might be dyslexic or have to have the paper written by somebody else. Those people will get 1 hour and 20 minutes. That is an example of driving equity within an organization. So that's diversity, inclusion, and equity. And these are apparently, as I speak, I find myself also, as Rajesh said, so small compared to what Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is all about. So my first question will be to Eka to first tell us, just help us experience what Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is, and where have we actually gone wrong, and why is it that we need to speak about it, because evidently we are not practicing it today. So how do we actually do it? And before you start, Eka, Rajiv, if you have to add to that later on after Eka has opened this, please feel free to join in. Yes.
Well, namaskar, and really thank you so much for inviting me for the CG Sammelan today. It's always such a pleasure and such a privilege. I want to start with what Rajeshji's comment in the chat says. He says, "Socho, nature mein to koi quota bhi nahi hota hai, and yet it works." And I must confess that over the last 1 week, I have been to so many organizations talking about diversity, inclusion, equity, International Women's Day. And I must confess that I find myself repeating it's the same theme and the same conversation that happens over and over again. And why this is so refreshing is because I will take on from what Rajeshji said, that we absorb a lot, we listen to a lot, and we absorb a lot, but maybe this is also time for us to put out a narrative, to change the narrative and bring a thought out there. And honestly, the G20 presidency, India's presidency with Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is actually such a powerful start in a country, in a globe which is currently seriously divisive, where, you know, we are actively at war, which threatens to become a much larger all-inclusive war. And we know where India is even being challenged on the fact that it is supporting one nation because of friendship, but that's the underdog nation, etc., right? So I think it's become very relevant to talk about this right now, and I'm so glad to be here doing that. So thank you, Swapna ji, thank you, Rajiv ji, thank you, Rajesh ji, thank you, Upasana and Aditi, who are always such a pleasure, by the way, to deal with. They resolve all your technical and emotional and intellectual issues. It's always a pleasure. So thank you, ladies. Um, I love the way Swapna ji explained the concept of diversity, inclusion, and equity. I'm actually going to build that up slightly, and I'll start from that same thread. Um, as human beings, as Homo sapiens, who we really are, that's the subspecies of human beings or human existence that we belong to. From the start of the dawn of Homo sapiens, we've actually been a very violent um, tribe. So at the time when Homo sapiens arrived on the planet, there were actually 6 other Homo species on the planet, Homo erectus being one of them. And by the way, if you go back to our Dashavatar, you realize that there have been mentions of other Homo species in that. So whether it was Vamana was the original pygmy man, Homo erectus. There is Parshuram, who was another Homo cousin as part of the sapien species. But ever since we arrived on the planet, we just caused mass distinction. We've been divisive. We were the whole shift from the hunter forager to the agricultural domesticate has been the shift from me versus you to us versus them. In a world which was so there have been 3 phases of Homo sapiens evolution. The first one was the hunter-forager. The hunter-forager was a very genderless existence. We were just a tribe. We were a tribe that went out. We actually operated on animal laws, whatever you want to call those animal laws. And they were very fair. They were very equitable, and they were very inclusive. Because we were about survival. We were about being integrated with the nature, and we read nature. We understood nature. We learned to cohabit with nature. And so we were one with nature. There was no, it wasn't even about a Kutumbakam as much as it was just the fact that we were one with nature. Vasudhaiva, as Rajiv will also talk about later. It's when we started it's when the quest to domesticate nature, control nature, agriculture, tribal settlements, that's when we really started creating a whole substructure. So एक तो होता है विधि के विधान जिसको कहते हैं, the laws by which the universe operates. The laws by which the universe operates, which is called Rita now, which used to be called the Hermetic principles in ancient Egypt, and Tehutian principles even before that. These were principles that were the principles of metaphysics. They were the laws of universe, what we call now Rita or Vidhi ke Vidhan. These were laws which said cyclicity in nature, polarity in nature, gender in nature, continuums, all of those. This is where the laws by which the universe operates. But because we became social creatures of social habit, we realized a need for human laws of existence. The human laws of existence are actually what we call Manu ke Vidhan, Manusmriti, Manushya ke Vidhan. These were laws of human existence. They were not necessarily aligned to nature's existence. And then, by the way, the interesting gender note on this is that as tribals, as hunter-foragers, human beings, we were one with nature. There was no difference. We were in awe of nature. We respected nature. We bowed down to nature. We lived with nature. When we started forming societies, we actually worshipped Mother Nature. And not only worshipped Mother Nature, but the goddess, the feminine cult the life-giving feminine force was the one that we bowed down. In fact, why I always find the celebration of International Women's Day in corporate world part ironic and part fascinating is because in India we actually have the world's largest living feminine cults and its celebration. So both are Navdurgas, whether it's in April or whether it's in October, they are just the celebration of pure, raw, feminine divinity in all its forms. We don't need a Stri Divas to celebrate this thing. Right? And this was where we were as a civilization, as a nation. In fact, long after the rest of the world had moved on. So from the start of civilization, as we call it, right until I think about 2000 odd years ago, is when Bharat Varsha, this land, this bhumi, was the bhumi of nature worshipping, of Prakriti. And Prakriti not as the female form, but Prakriti, as Rajesh ji mentioned, as a energy form. Now, it is when the politics of land that started happening, which is the process that began about 2000 years ago, plus minus 500 years ago. That's really when we were so actively going against nature with land grab, with space grab, as Rajesh ji said, meri jagah or tumhari jagah. And these things don't happen with nature. We were going against nature so deliberately as human beings that we actually needed to also change our aradhyas. We could no longer worship nature or be part of nature or even domesticate nature at this time in this phase where we were so actively out to destroy nature. And that's when the transition happened. And globally, across all your cults, all your mythologies, your Assyrian, Greek, Australian, Aboriginal, Chinese, you will see this transition happening, where we realized that we needed to have new narratives. And these new narratives were actually your, I won't even say patriarchal, but very toxic masculine narratives, which had, by the way, nothing to do with men and women or male and female. It is the energy that we needed to validate our conquest of nature. And that's why we are sitting today right now, the realization. So one part of that realization at a very superficial level is to bring the honor of the woman back in her physical form. But the bigger part of that realization, the subconscious part of that realization is actually realizing that we need to discover the feminine divinity all over again. We need to become aligned once with nature. And I think, and that's what Swapna ji, Rajiv ji and I were talking, that COVID has probably actually catalyzed this conversation even further, because after a very long time, after wars that happened and bloodshed that happened, we finally reached a stage where nature was bigger than all of us. And so maybe this International Women's Day, and in this phase, I would actually be very delighted if we explored Prakriti as herself, nature as herself, therefore Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam as herself. And we've been talking about this narrative where over the last 2000, 2500 odd years, we really think we've conquered the earth as human beings. We really think that, we are the animals that control everything and everything else is subjugate to us. Never mind what nature is telling us. And there's a certain sense of arrogance that we are at the top of the food chain. There are no tops of food chains. There are only cycles. And the cyclicity of nature, human behavior, birth and death, life, gender is not a Manushya ka Vidhan. It is not a law of human nature. That is Vidhi ka Vidhan. That is Rhythm. So whether we like it or not, nature will assert. Nature is cyclical. It is systemic. In fact, even with most scientific studies and the scientist perspectives today are shifting from what they used to call reductionist, isolationary science to the systemic view. The systemic view says if you study the minor, you will understand all the other impacts. So there is an emergence. There is an emergence to bring women to the center of conversation. There is hopefully an emergence, and if it isn't there, we need to drive it actively, of bringing nature, earth, ecosystems as circular, as systemic pieces, and not as us as rulers of this planet called Earth that we are allowed to come and destroy completely. And so to me, therefore, this need for we have this very binary, linear Western narrative that we are living with right now, which is we are at the top of the food chain. And we believe the man is at the top of the food chain. Is the knight in shining armor, is the ruler. There's the woman who's second in command in the food chain. She's the damsel in distress. And then there is the rest of the earth for the meek and the weak and the strong to inherit. So there is a shift for that narrative. And I think I've always believed that whenever the world sees a crisis come up, they turn to this side of the world. And so in the 60s, there was a spiritual, moral bankruptcy crisis. And so you went back and discovered meditation, dhyana, ashram. In the 80s, there was a physiological crisis. You came back and discovered yoga is 500 years old, tried and tested way of life. I do believe that we're at the brink of that crisis now, catalyzed completely by the pandemic that's happened, where the world didn't know what to do with themselves, but India did, and India did do very well on it. So therefore, we're at the right space, right time, right philosophy. We're at a space where Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam will become the slogan to the world, and we're leading the change from front. So no better place for us now to set out this plural, one with nature, complete and engaged with yourself and with those around you. And we will talk about dharma and equity further in this conversation, to actually bring out and embrace equity and establish Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam.
What a beautiful start. What a beautiful start. I think you've put that, your opening comments have been so helpful in setting what Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is all about. One is giving up on the arrogance that we are at the top of the food chain, and to understand that we are interdependent with the entire universe the way it is. The second point, you also said that we don't need to look towards the West. I'm just remembering, Switzerland got its franchise for women in 1971. By the time we already had a prime minister also. So I don't know why we even do that. Even at a superficial level, we are much, much ahead. And what I like, the most beautiful thing you said is that we need a balance between masculinity and femininity. There's too much of masculinity, which has eroded the world of its value. And this is the time for femininity to actually emerge anew. So Rajiv, tell us about how there is no other imperative other than this.
Well, thank you. Thank you, in fact, Eka, for those wonderful start, actually, and those starting points. And Swapnika, you're right. I think we need to kind of, just try to understand this whole thing in a context, and which of course, Eka, you have so beautifully put in now. I think makes my job very easy. See, I'll pick up from where you left, actually. What happened is that you talked about an egocentric world, and then we're moving, in fact, and ultimately we have to move towards an ecocentric world, from ego to eco. And that's important, because from being on top of the food chain, being a part of the circularity. So what we talk about, the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam concept, in fact, is basically taking an example of the earth. Vasudhaiva. So Iya means like earth. So in this, the assumption, the premise is that, yes, earth in itself is interconnected and hyperconnected, and that was known to us 5,000 years ago. And we talked about it even earlier, that yes, earth is earth-like. But what happened when the civilization took place, in fact, when agriculture and, later on the industrial revolution started, what we did was we went away from nature, in fact. And therefore, when we became civilized, we had a context where we exploited and explored and extricated. So it was an extricative and exploitative world order that we have lived through. And therefore, whenever the civilization developed, in fact, even as late as the first, second, and the third industrial revolution, what was happening that every time a technology improvement took place, from the discovery of fire to discovery of wheel, and then steam engine, electricity, and even computers, the point was that our capacity to exploit and extract more and more increased. And this actually has brought us on to the brink of the 5th, 6th extinction event. Now that is important. because now it makes us rethink as to what were the growth imperatives. Was it just, people talk now even about planet, people and profit, but they miss out the purpose part of it. What was the purpose part of it, in fact? And therefore,
Rajiv, can I just interject? Explain to us what is this extinction challenge that you're speaking about?
Okay, that's fine. So see, what happened is that when for 50 million years ago, in fact, when the fifth extinction event took place, the particulate matter of the greenhouse gases was to the extent of between 150 to 300 parts per million. And this is something which is very factual and very current. Because if we understand the climate change, in fact, and the nature of the impact that will have on us, we need to understand what is the real problem, what's the disease, and what is the symptom. Climate change is just a mere symptom. The real disease is the concentration of greenhouse gases. And you would be surprised that in today's context, as late as even 1950s, the concentration was just merely 300 parts per million, which was absolutely sustainable because the world had sustained itself for over 50 million years. But now what happened between 1950 and today, which means last 72 to 73 years, we have increased the concentration to 490 parts per million. So therefore, 490 parts per million is absolutely not sustainable. Even supposing we go for zero emission right now, zero carbon emission, net zero, which we talk about till say 50 even, on 2070 people talk about, that's not going to be causing a problem. In fact, more than the fact that yes, the whole world will not be existing probably by then, because the temperature rise, because of this increasing concentration. However, all those mitigating efforts won't help right now. We have to find a way to reverse global warming, which means reverse the concentration of greenhouse gases. And fortunately now, when I said that, this is a phase change moment for us. This is a moment where Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam becomes real. So far, what we have been talking about is that, okay, we have this concept and we always come under criticism also as a culture that, well, while we celebrate our deities, but in real life, in fact, in the villages and rural India, the status of women is the most ugliest of it that it could be. And this none of us can deny. So the point is that now we get an opportunity to address this issue. And there is now a reason for us to actually look back at nature. And Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam not only becomes an imperative, but the only way in which world can be sustainable now. And let's talk about it now. So thanks, Swapnalekha, for reminding me that, yes, this is the sixth extinction event. So we have to find ways, and there are ways, in fact. There are very simple ways to do it. And fortunately, you would be surprised that the role of women and girls is the most important in this. There are 10, supposing the top 10 ways in which this concentration of gas can be reversed. The first one, of course, is the energy. The second would be the food, the way we create our food and agriculture practices. And then, of course, the way we kind of, transport. But the fourth most important one is women and child, girl education and family planning. This itself will contribute to about 12% out of the 100 reduction measures of greenhouse concentration of gases. This is very wonderful in the sense that, you give the woman the freedom to kind of choose whether or not and when to have a child. The whole population pressure is because of that, because they don't have a right to say. And I'm not talking of urban-centric, some corporate people, in fact, and women and girl, but the girl at large, 85% of them who lie in Africa, Sahara, in fact, in India and rural India and other countries of gas. So the point is that is the real thing. And girl education actually is the only thing which actually, surprisingly, there is no negativity around it. There is no decreasing rate of return. There is always, in fact, an appreciation. The more you educate, there is cascading impact and goes down to generations and generations. And that is the beauty of those Project Drawdown, which has been actually ascertained and given us 100 measures to reverse global warming. The topmost singular aspect is women and girl child education and family planning. So that has a role for a woman. And then, of course, it's supposed to be kind of, talking about an exponential technological world, holistic philosophy, circularity of economics, and human-centric development, which will actually, again, bring a lady or a girl child or a woman on the fore. So coming to where I left. I think.
Yeah, you've connected this entire idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam to the relevance of the session today so beautifully. And which is why probably you've proven the fact that women-led development is the only choice that we had. Like, for example, COVID didn't give us a choice. We had to behave in a certain way. So what you're saying is now there's no other choice other than making the woman the center of it. And just before you start, I was just thinking how the UN always reports women empowerment in terms of the number of women in the workforce. And nothing can be farther away from the truth in terms of actually making a change in the world by calculating about the number of dollars that the woman is contributing to the economy. Because she lies at the center of a mini universe, and if she has a hold on, influencing the habits of an entire unit, the smallest social unit is the family, then the entire world changes actually. So, pehla kutumb to change ho, uske baad then actually the entire thing. Yes. So yes.
So having put that first part of it, the world order, what is changing today? People might say that, well, technology is creating more disruption and market turbulence, and therefore we see kind of, war is raging. In fact, everything absolutely against the principal concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which talks about globalism, cosmopolitanism, cross-cultural affiliation, addressing global needs, having a dialogue, the need to build bridges, all that, those principles which are otherwise the motherhood principles are actually not seen anywhere. And so people say that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is only a poster slogan. But the point is that the technology itself, the most important thing, that how do you not weaponize technology? How do you create governance in technology? And how do you manage climate change? All the solutions that are there for doing this is all about treating world as one, from an exploitative and extractive world order to a more regenerative and a restorative one. Now, how does technology help us? The point is that we have already reached to the extent of fifth extinction event. So capitalism, as we know it, the whole model of growth has actually, in economics, has actually failed us. So therefore, there is no more growth for us. There will be profits, but profits if you earn in a planet which doesn't exist. What's the point? So that is one thing which all capitalism, in fact, in the world over capitalism, is not that you replace capitalism or have socialism or other kind of isms, any ism in that sense. But the point is that this whole reformation, you have to make sustainable capitalism. So from shareholder to stakeholder, from economics to nature, this is something which is the problem number one, which needs address. And anyways, like nuclear proliferation, like war, like technological governance and climate change, it cannot happen unless we consider world as one single unit. There cannot be pockets of climate change management. There cannot be, because climate and environment will not respect any boundaries which are there on the maps, which are in our books. The nature doesn't have any kind of boundaries being put. True. So Earth as such, therefore now we have to understand that planet. So this whole Eka was talking about that, we have creating an asymmetry. In fact, by being on the top of the food chain, we have created our own laws, in fact, superimposed upon the very fact that Earth is one, hyper-connected, interconnected. There are interconnection, there's symbiotic relationship. It's not just the count of trees. It's actually the sense of the forest, which makes the forest, which makes the Earth. So you have to understand the big picture and complex details, systemic thinking, rather than systematically only. Systemic would be all those kind of, backward, forward linkages have to be found out. So therefore, what I'm very happy about is that this is a moment of truth for all of us as a humanity. And where Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is not only a principle or a poster slogan anymore, and women and girl child are not just necessarily, events to be celebrated at certain intervals, but there has to be a continuous, in fact, understanding of the fact that yes, technology is there, which can help us. There is a crisis which can only be handled. There is fortunately technology. And this is the beauty of it. Technology is neutral till we use it. So technology cannot be blamed for all the problems, because technology has the flip side also. Technology has downgraded humanity. It has created polarization. It has created a post-truth world. Technology has also shortened our attention deficit. There are more kind of, suicides because of social validation needs. So technology has its flip side. But technology alone can help us manage the environment, bring that reverse global warming through all the existing. Out of 100, there are 80 technologies which are already available. And there are only 20 which need to be invented. And with 80, we can bring this down to less than 30 years, we can reverse global warming to the manageable proportions. So we have to just have the will now. In fact, the mind, the heart, and the will. And that is where this becomes just a reason. The methodology is there. The idea is that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, how do we implement it? That's also, there is a problem.
I think you've taken the 30,000 feet view very beautifully. And you've said that very rightly, that we have to take a systemic view. Otherwise, it will be like the mechanics way of dealing with a car ki ek taraf ek mara to dusri taraf se kuch aur nikal gaya and samne se to dikha ho gaya hai, but piche se gaadi fir bhi gadbad chal rahi hai, which is what doctors are doing with our body. So I think coming from there, यथार्थ के धरातल पर आके एका ये बताइए कि this change has to start from, we are all students of Indian wisdom. It has to start from me. I mean, until unless I do it, and यथा पिंडे तथा ब्रह्मांडे, जब तक अंदर experience नहीं आएगा तब तक पता कैसे चलेगा बाहर क्या करना है. So tell us about that. Speak to us about that.
Swapna, I think incidentally, unfortunately, this experience has always been experienced by all of us now. In the last 2 years, when the pandemic happened, we all realized that what it was to cooperate and collaborate. The world over, leave aside few exceptions around how people blamed each other in countries.
But I think there's a long way to go. There's still a very, very long way to go, I think, Rajiv, because वो तो कुछ चीजें हम पे force हो गई.
मैं क्या कह रहा हूँ अभी force क्या होगा? I'm telling you how it will happen. The technology has one aspect of it, which is actually capability is going up and cost is coming down. Now, what happens? It is in the area of communication, in the area of transport, in the area of energy, in the area of food and agriculture, and also in the way we handle materials. So the entire spectrum of technology production is going to be that way. So what I'm trying to tell you is that this is the moment of truth for us, that yes, what we thought is superficial and 30,000 level is the reality, because we will go for green only by greed, because the EVs would be so cheap, would be cheaper. Yes. Actually, because then that becomes practical. हम क्या करते हैं, सिद्धांतों को मानते नहीं है, ये वो आइडियलिज्म है. बट आइडियलिज्म नहीं है. आइडियलिज्म अगर एक विजन रहेगा तभी तो आप रियलिस्टिकली आइटरेट करके स्टेप बाय स्टेप यू कैन.
आई थिंक वो भी आप जो कह रहे हैं राजीव बहुत जरूरी है, बिकॉज the individualism, according to me, the individual is important and the leader is important in this entire ecosystem. So while Ika speaks to us about the individual, you tell us that how does leadership need to channelize and implement it within the workplace and business to actually implement these things. That's also equally important. Absolutely. Because here we are a set of people who are operating as individuals, but we have roles which are leadership roles within probably our family or within our institution or government or wherever. So let's start with that individual Vitika first.
So therefore, that's a very good.
Build up on what Rajiv. Sorry, aap kuch keh rahe?
You want me to say?
No, Ika. I was asking Ika about this.
Let me build up actually on what Rajiv ji said, which is so brilliant about moving from egocentrism to ecocentrism. We've spoken about the need for the hour and how Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is not a good to have happy slogan, and not just for us, for the world around us as well, but it is an imperative. Otherwise, we collapse. End of story. Right? Now, two things. One is, remember, we collapse, the nature and the earth doesn't collapse. They will still survive. Right? So therefore, and this is where the integration between the Manushya ke Vidhan, the Manu Vidhan, and the Vidhi ke Vidhan, the Rita, happens together. I've always been so fascinated with the way dharma has been described. And there are only two principles on which we live. Dharma, which is what I owe, what I bear. Dhar, bear. Atma, me, what I bear, my way of life. It's not religion, it's not rituals. It is what I owe. And on the other side is karma, what I need to do. Right? So I will actually start with the concept of dharma, which integrates the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, being one with nature, the Vidhi ke Vidhan and the Rita, to the law. So what does the human need to do in the context of the environmental ecosystem? What is your way of life? In the Bhagavad Gita, it's mentioned beautifully, the idea that there are three dharmas that we owe to ourselves in our relationship with ourselves. Swadharma, what I owe to myself. Aparadharma. Aparadharma is what I owe by virtue of my space and time context. So by virtue of my jati, kala, vishaya, vastu, etc., where I've been born, to the context. And the third is the paradharma, what I owe to nature, to the upholding of the laws of rhythm. Now, while these might appear as very philosophical, they're actually very real, because it organizes our individual structures and our relationships. So if we have to move from the linearity of the egocentric to the circularity of the ecocentric, it actually organizes these spheres brilliantly. So the first is my relationship with my own self. Right? Aapne you spoke about the small minds versus the big minds. But Swadharma, and again, one of the Mahavakyas is so powerful in my relationship with myself. Tata Tvama Asi, that which you are, and I bow down to the divinity within you. But Aham Brahmasmi, I am the infinite divine universe within myself. And if I can sort out my relationship with myself, the world will take care of itself. Right? So Swadharma, me. The second one, which is our contexts. This in the industrialized world that we are in right now and the context we live in, my circle of mine, mera kya hai? You started your shloka with saying na main mera aur tum tumhara aur ye meri space aur wo tumhari space. तो मेरा क्या है और मैं मेरे के लिए क्या कर सकता हूँ? And so मेरा क्या है is my relationship with my, in the professional context, with my teams, with my superiors, with my peers. So my first degree of influence. And what do I owe therefore? What do I need to change or shift in my relationship with in my personal space as well, mine. So which is my parents, my siblings, my children, my family, my brothers, sisters, family, friends. Ye ho gaya aapka, me ho gaya, mine ho gaya. So my relationship with me, my relationship with mine. And then there is the paradharma, my relationship with my extended support systems. Now, while I understand that there needs to be a organizational, a governmental, and industrial imperative as far as relationship with Earth is concerned, or climate is concerned, within our own spheres, if we can figure out what our contribution to my mankind is, womankind, humankind, but what my contribution to mankind is in terms of what I contribute or what I owe to my tribes and my communities, in my personal space, and therefore what my contribution is to the organizations and industries in my professional workspace. And Rajiv ji will talk further about, extending leadership to that level. But to me, equity will therefore begin if I can resolve myself at these three levels. So the whole principle of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam actually gets reduced to my spheres. मैं क्या कर सकता हूँ? मुझे आज क्या करना है? My spheres in my relationship with myself, with those around me, and the extended human community. Now, this is where, so I'm starting with Swapna ji, your definitions of diversity, of inclusion, and then of equity. So both diversity and inclusion get addressed the moment I have identified and started working on my spheres of control first. Now comes to equity, and I'm going back to the industry that I came from. That equity kya hota hai? So the literal origin of the word equity is aquitas. Aquitas is ownership. It's the same word, by the way, that has the origin of something like equity as in stocks and markets, acquire. All of this, acute, all of that comes from aquitas. Now, which means I need to have ownership, which is what equity is. So if you can figure out, and to resolve this, and I come back to those three spheres of reference, if you can figure out that what is the ownership I am establishing over my own self, my karma, my thoughts, my intentions, my behaviors, and my contribution. Even if you have to be, even if you're saying, chalo yaar, main selfish hu, if I'm looking after myself, that's fine. But if you're doing that with the concept of ownership of your own self, it's like hum junk food khate hain, right? So we eat junk food, I turn around and tell you, how does it make a difference to your life, Swapna ji? I am having my own junk food, it's impacting me only. But this is where my ownership of myself happens. If I can respect myself enough to know that that junk food is damaging me, so where is my ownership of my own self? Similarly, extending further, where is my ownership of those that are around me? So for instance, if my child is behaving badly and has gone and beaten up somebody, I turn around and say, that is his job. That is the kind of person that he is. Versus actually turning around and taking the ownership of those that are around me. Very often, for instance, and a lot of us are in that life stage, we take ownership of, for instance, our parents when they become old. Right? We start taking decisions, ki aao chalo unko hospital de de, unko yahan se wahan relocate kar de. We do the same thing for our children. What we don't realize is that ownership is not control. even when you're talking about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that whole linearity, that ownership is not control. Ownership is respect. Ownership is establishing a relationship with. And by the way, this is exactly what has caused that shift of disrespect. That we haven't assumed ownership of nature or technology or our organizations, but control. And the moment we can, and this is where actually my relationship with my tribes and communities comes in, because that is where I can't establish ownership. So unko humne abandon kar diya hai. अपने साथ की रिलेशनशिप में हमने अपने आप को डिसरिस्पेक्ट कर लिया है, which is fine because it is just me and myself. What I do is none of your business. अपने आसपास के रिलेशनशिप्स में, अपने फर्स्ट डिग्री ऑफ रिलेशनशिप्स में हमने ओनरशिप को कंट्रोल में कन्वर्ट कर लिया है, और अपने मैनकाइंड वाले रिलेशनशिप में, because that is like so far away, I've just abandoned it. Yeah, let me just take care of this and that and we are fine. The moment, and that's where I'm actually quite eager to then hand back to Rajiv ji in terms of saying that therefore what does the leadership needs to do, except that I believe that leadership begins with your own self. So for instance, in our relationship with ourselves, and I think we spoke about this earlier, what is my identity? What am I holding on to? Okay, and it's a very conscious and an aware phenomenon. Just as every time I eat junk food, I am disrespecting myself. Similarly, every time I speak badly to someone, get angry, get hurt, get offended, become sarcastic, I am disrespecting myself. It's not to that person that it's not a reflection on you at all. It's a reflection on me. It's not on you at all. Similarly, when I'm at war with any kind of a diverse or a different person, with me versus you, it's a reflection on me. It's not a reflection on them. So for instance, I find it fascinating that hum gender pe baat kar rahe hain, but gender is actually just one aspect of my existence, right? I have a race, I have an age, I have a gender, I have a job, I have some qualities, I have a religion, I have so many things that define. But the moment I hold on to my identity, any one identity, I am disrespecting my other identities. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but the moment I say I'm a woman, I am not recognizing that I'm also a human. So जब हमने आज diversity की बात करी थी, today we are being forced to acknowledge diversity in the context of people with disabilities, religion, education, gender. But equity will actually happen when we are not acknowledging diversities, but rising above them. Jaisa Mujana, I have to share this little incident which I completely love from the Mahabharata. So after the war was over, Bhim and Arjun, I think, were having this massive argument between themselves about which one of them killed more people, right? So Bhim said, I killed all the 100 Kauravas. Arjun said, no, it doesn't matter. I killed more people, etc., etc. So they said, let's actually walk up to Barbarik. So Barbarik's head was put on a little mound there at Kurukshetra, and there's a long history of why Barbarik was there. And they went to Barbarik, and they said, you know what, Barbarik, you need to resolve this for us. हम दोनों में से किसने ज़्यादा लोग मारे हैं? Barbarik कहता, I have no clue. So I said, what do you mean you don't know? How can you not know? You saw everything. He said, no, you saw the war. You saw people killing each other. You saw the war and the blood and the horses and the elephants. He said, from where I saw, I only saw two things. I saw Draupadi ke blood, lust, hair flowing through the battle. And I saw the Sudarshan Chakra throughout. Right? So in my worldview, the way that we can actually deal with this, within our relationship with ourselves, have I disappeared?
Yes, you have,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
okay.
we can't
Carry
see.
on.
Okay,
That's
I'll
fine.
start again.
We can hear you
I have
clearly.
no idea what's, like I said, not my laptop, sorry. But the moment we can rise up beyond the identity, religion, race, gender, age that we hold on to, and rise up to see who we really are. Wait, I'm going to stop the video and start again. Something's happening there.
Eka,
That's a
you
Zoom
can
issue.
go off video and speak.
Yeah.
There's a
Okay, I think
setting.
that's a
So
good
वो
idea,
immediately नहीं होगा. आप बात कीजिए.
Okay, so the moment we can rise up beyond holding on to our identities, we will not have a need for recognizing either diversity or inclusion, because then we are not being man or woman, but being human. We are not being, because it is in human nature, and that's why I'd spoken about evolution, that as Homo sapiens, we seek to stand apart. The difference between human beings and animals is that animals seek to conform and homogeneity. The human being seeks to stand apart. So if we weren't discussing gender here, Swapnaji, there's a very high possibility that we would be discussing race or religion, right? So then the need for equity, therefore, is to move beyond who I am, what I am, and focus on my relationship with myself, my identity that I hold on to, and therefore spread it out in the context of my relationship with me, my relationship with mine, and my relationship with mankind. And I will actually say,
I think that was, yeah, carry on. You were saying something.
actually,
Closing.
that's where I want to pause just now. And
So I think you said three very, very beautiful things. And I think in the chat, people are just so, I mean, everybody see it, that control is not the same as ownership. I think that's a very, very important part. We all try to take control, but not ownership. And that happens at all.
Can I just come in to clarify that one? That whole idea, which by the way in our Western management institutes is taught to us as circle of control and circle of concern, and we are taught to expand this and reduce that, etc., etc. That's not how our texts talk about it.
No,
There's
no.
an entire chapter on the Kshetra and Kshetragya, which is chapter 13 in the Bhagavad Gita, which actually says that what is within your control, your Kshetra, whether it is your emotional body, your physical body, or your intellectual body. That is all that is within your control. Everything else is kshetragya. And that's the difference between control and ownership. कि तुम अपना body, अपना mind, और अपना intellect sort out कर लो. Everything else
will get sorted. I think that, and the other bit which you spoke about, the identity, at times I feel that a certain holding on to a certain kind of an identity makes you disadvantaged. And I think you've given a very beautiful way out of that, that rather than holding on to an identity which actually disadvantages you, it is good to switch over and also accept and acknowledge those identities which actually make you powerful somewhere. So why be the victim over here always? I think it's a very beautiful method of moving from a victim mindset to actually saying, I am the, captain of my own destiny, as it is saying. So very, very beautifully said. And I think it's a very logical move on to Rajiv ji to tell us that this is what we can do at an individual level, Rajiv ji. You've headed organizations and you have made policies and you have led people. What is it that leaders can actually do at their workplaces to drive home these kind of philosophies for people to take ownership of where they are, of who they are, and what they can influence? Because if every individual does it, then the organization is the ideal place to be in. So what would you say that, and you have lived experience and you've done things, tell us about those. You have to unmute yourself, Rajiv ji.
Well, now that the conversation has gone on to a different level, I think I'll have to pick up a lot of loose threads, in fact, and then build up. But because sake of time, I think we need to kind of, sum it up fast. So, Swapna, going on and answering your question, basically, what's happened is that what are leaders supposed to be doing now? The point is that we have to assume that linearity is gone and dead. So it's non-linear accelerated changes that are happening. So leadership of today cannot know that I have all the answers. The leadership today would be adaptive leadership, where you have to have only the questions, the right adaptive questions. Computers are all bad. Chat GPT is all bad because it has all the answers. Today, you require leadership which has all the questions and the right question, A.
True.
And this is just for the sake of brevity, I'm trying to tell you that, this is one point, which is that leadership has to reorient itself according to what we have described from an exploitative, extractive universe where efficiency was a primary motive, to drive efficiency using technology and more. You have reached a plateau. Now onwards, it's destruction of the earth, so that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, earth-like unity and family, because earth is not a literal sense, what it meant was that copy the earth. We should have actually followed what the earth was telling us, that have circularity, have interdependence, have hyperconnectivity, talk about interdependently dependent agencies, and rather than going the egocentric way. So that is the point number 2. The governance structure of leadership changes, because from control, telling, to kind of facilitation, bottoms up, democratized, diffuse decision making, participative, inclusive, and diverse decision making basis, because nobody has, in this world of exponential knowledge and exponential wisdom and information available all over, you cannot say that one single mind can hold all the wisdom. So leadership today, by definition, has to be diffused and democratized. So empowerment is not a virtue. Empowerment is an imperative. You have to empower people. You have to trust people. You have to give them freedom. So agency, you cannot just do it yourself. So leadership has to disorient itself, I would say the word disorient yourself, because we have lived in a world. So we have to now keep a world which is restorative and regenerative. Regeneration is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. I'm sticking to that point, that this is the point we must drive home at, that there was an agricultural revolution, industrial revolution. It was all about exploiting and extracting. Now this is a digital revolution, which is talking about convergence of various technologies. It is creating possibilities. And therefore, we get a second chance right now to kind of mend our ways and have a leadership orientation, which actually understands, makes people aware, and takes the right decision towards restoring and regenerative, creation of the possibility. Otherwise, there is a collective doom. So right now, the good thing is that what was written in our Veda, Ekam Sat Vipra Vadanti. The point is that this talks to the principle of harmony. That's the only way to establish. Otherwise, my religion is the best. Yes, your religion is the best, but only for you, not for others. So that kind of harmonious construct of this whole philosophy of oneness, and equanimity, and I would say disinterestedness, or dispassion for things, and detaching yourself, as Eka was telling, from your any kind of identity. The moment you identify yourself, you're identifying yourself with the physical world here. And as is told in Vedanta, that Brahm Satyam Jagat Mithya Jeev Brahme Vanapara, it's like the kind of this world is only a vyavaharik satya. वो पारमार्थिक सत्य जो है वहीं पर, वहां पर भी आइडेंटिटी तो है ही नहीं कुछ. So there is nothing called identity. It's like a frame of mind. I mean, ego is mano, buddhi, chitta, ahankar. It's just one aspect of that instrument called mind, which is mentioned in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So that kind of thing is now the reality, because whatever was written us, whatever we knew about ourselves, our culture, our wisdom now is something which is an imperative, and the whole world understands. By the way, I'm telling you, it's not that I'm constructing something. You talk about brain and consciousness studies, David Chalmers, Christoph Koch. Then there is, I think, Roger Penrose talks about the world not being, this world not being real. It's just a mathematical construct. There's Sam Harris, in fact, you talk about Kristan, in fact, Hitchens, you talk about Daniel Dennett. All these kind of people, they've come to understand that, well, there is some bit of truth in Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, in fact, where they talk about Shunyata and he talks about Purnata, and they are no thing. I mean, there's not a thing, so it can exist like that, and therefore the world may possibly be consciousness. Of course, science has not gone that far, because we still believe that consciousness and mind are separate things, but possibly the West still believe that consciousness is mind.
Just 1 second, can I interject in, Rajiv? Only to build up on what you said.
Just let me complete this thought, just for a second. Just let me complete that.
Only. Achha, chaliye, okay.
Nah, the people like those, so this is also being accepted. So when people say कि साहब Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam जो है, अब आते हैं बात पर, just to end the point that ये सब theory है, theory नहीं है अब. Humanism is that we have dehumanized ourselves because of the industrial need of efficiency. Now is an opportunity, and the world, by the way, we don't have time. Otherwise, I could have gone on length, in fact, explaining how the world is changing to become, there is a digital revolution, and there is, in fact, a decarbonization revolution, and there is a humanities revolution that is going to come. Humans now, from human resource, we have a possibility of making ourselves into human beings. So therefore, this whole cycle, let us turn full circle. From where it started, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, now Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is the only way to exist. So if we understand this reality, science, technology is helping us to do that. And all these Western thinkers, in fact, including the physicists who have won the Nobel Prize this year, there is Ed Witten, who talks about the fact that consciousness is something we'll not be able to understand. There is a hard problem of consciousness, but somebody like, Galen Strawson says that there is a hard problem of matter, which means whatever the problems are, you have to understand that matter has to be understood as subatomic part. There are quarks, there are, strings, there are superstrings. So matter itself is disappearing into nothingness. So possibly consciousness could be the possible And when you talk about, all kind of quantum computing, where, entanglement, non-locality and non-separation are the reality. That means, वो जो एका बोल रही है कि जो हमारी identity वो तो है ही नहीं, and she is right that identity जब आपकी है ही नहीं कहीं, that's a made-up story. Anyways, it's all a construct of the mind. So, because mano, buddhi, chit, ahankar, these are all, aspects of their functions of your mind. They are not in themselves your personality.
So you're saying that leaders have no imperative but to become spiritual now? There is no other way out, is what you're saying.
This as the reality, and they have to operate on this consciousness.
And this,
that's the only way to kind of,
yes.
I would say,
and
the second here.
And the second thing you also said, which I would like to highlight, I think, which is very beautiful, is that the time now is not for leaders is not to give answers, but to look for answers by asking the right questions, because the world is becoming.
Picasso said that, technology and computers are useless because they have all the answers. So something which is only human, human has to be now nurtured. So technology can be smarter, but smartness is not the only thing that is going to solve the problem. The human, so we can have amazing technology, but we have to have awesome people. That's the combination. You have to have a combination of technology and humanism. So you have to drive the driverless car. That is the summation goal. And then only Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam can become real. Otherwise, it will remain a poster slogan.
True that. And I take off. Yes, Eka.
I want to comment.
Yeah, Eka, sorry. That is where I wanted to end.
It's so powerful. जो राजीव जी बात कर रहे थे ना about the whole science and the whole consciousness conversation, this has been explained so unbelievably beautifully by Swami Vivekananda. This whole wave particle duality, and what we exist is the ocean of consciousness. And I don't know if you remember, but Rajesh ji we had posted the videos of this year's Nobel Prize, the physics Nobel Prize, which is actually on this discovery, right? Now, we've had this in our text for 20,000 years. Right, we've only been, the world has been excited about the virtues of yoga and Ayurveda because we see the benefit. But to me, if as this collective, if the only one thing that we do, Swapna ji, is put out our texts, translate them, and just put them out as hypothesis, go test, live with it, see how it works. There is such a gorgeous alternative narrative language Google that we would have created. So that was the first thing I wanted to sort of just mention, because that's a powerful point by Rajiv ji. The second one on this chat GPT thing, we were actually having a conversation, and Rajesh has put out so well, we need a Prashna GPT. But we were having this very nice conversation about the questions we ask. And there's this whole thing that if the chat GPT can take over the entire intellectual processing of the human brain, so humans kya karenge? So this whole thing about jobs that will become redundant, etc., etc. But as Rajiv ji put it so nicely, then the only job that the human has is to be human. That technology can't do, right? And on Prashna GPT, and I love that, therefore, because we've had a lot of conversation where leaders of organizations are reaching out to us to say, how do we deal with the new world, right? And I just want to take that little one in the context of the questions we ask. It's again in the Upanishads, there's this very nice description of 3 kinds of questions. So there are Adham Adhikari questions. These are what we call confirmatory questions. Pointless questions. Tumne khana kha liya, tum so gaye, are you okay, not okay? Very yes and no answer questions. Then there are Madhyam Adhikari questions, which are clarificatory questions, which are asked either to confirm or re-clarify, or are asked to show off knowledge. So did you really just say you wanted me to put a spoon of sugar in the chai? Clarificatory. Or do you know what happened yesterday? Of course, I know what happened yesterday. I'm trying to tell you what happened yesterday, right? And the third kind of questions are called Uttamadhikari questions, which are your curiosity questions, right? So confirmatory, clarificatory, and curiosity. These are questions that only humans can ask. Technology cannot ask curiosity questions. Right? So curiosity questions are, what do I need to do? How do I rise above what I'm doing right now? What does my relationship with so-and-so need to be? In an organization, and this is how leaders are now coming to say that when I have a strategy meet, am I supposed to, how do I talk to my sales guy? So no longer is it about tumhara customer kaun hai ya number kaise badhenge, but suddenly the question is, what are the new markets? Who's the new customer? How's your customer evolved? Right? And my sense is, Swapna ji, that the moment we can rise above and our identities and move to organizational existence, earth existence, sustainable existence, our human existence, we will find that the moment we are asking these questions, issues of diversity, inclusion, equity will become so irrelevant, because we will deal with those larger questions of how do we survive, how do we integrate with the earth, how do we become sustainable. And the answers that will follow, as Rajiv ji said, will anyways solve for, women-based organizations. You realize that giving a woman power to have her own child, etc. So, wo apne aap ho jayenge, sir.
Actually, as you say that, I totally agree with you. And we need leaders who have the patience to hold this principle and work with it, rather than given to imperatives that are happening all around, like period leave happening. And these are the kind of...
Very short, small matter. They're matter of hygiene.
Yeah. So there's a question from the audience, and would be, so you could just, both of you could answer this in just a minute. How do you move from consumerism, the way the West looks at it, the way the West is doing, to constructive consumerism and contribution? That's like one of the UN SDG roles also, responsible consumption and production. How? So responsible consumption, what do we guide our thoughts with? Yes, Rajiv.
Let me take this.
Yes, Rajiv.
Basically. See, what's very interesting actually, because in this context of the discussion that we have had, if you tell people that, you be selfless, you consume less, there is a problem, because people say, how does it matter to you? But let's look at the level of consumption today. The Western society has consumed to an extent that if you go by American level of consumption, if everybody on earth, we will require 5 earths. There is 1.7, which is a very important figure, 1.7 earths required even for current consumption to be sustained. So this consumption level is unsustainable. So therefore now the realization is, as an imperative, it's very sad that humans learn only when there is in fact a crisis. But the crisis is real today. So you have to, people are thinking about alternative modes of capitalism or sustainable capitalism, which means you don't maximize production and maximize consumption. You kind of optimize consumption and optimize production, maximize human well-being, maximize your purposiveness, that humanness. You maximize what is called the planetary need of sustenance, increase the capacity of the planet to have a regenerative ecology so that we can all flourish together. So human flourishing is important, not profits. You can have profits, but profits at the cost of the planet, as somebody said rightly, Eric Hoffer, I think, was the one who said that those people who consider all this will inherit the earth. Those who do not will inherit a lavish way in which the world will not even exist. So that is the reality. So consumerism of Western kind is something which is absolutely not sustainable, and sustainability itself is not good enough today.
Very beautifully said.
Measures that, you reduce your fuel usage, you use EVs and this and that. Those are very small measures. You have to consider all those 100 motives, and you have to decrease, reverse global warming. There could be
I think,
is also not a solution.
And
so
as you
speak, become relevant, because consumption is the height of it, part of it.
And as you're speaking, Rajiv, there are lots of young people over here. What reminds me of is the fast fashion industry, which produces by the billions items of clothes, where we do not have enough number of people also in the world to do that. And then
1.7 earths we are consuming right now. So this is basically mind-bogglingly ridiculous. In fact, do you think Russia is fighting for some cause? That's basically the dying, the fossil fuel country is fighting Aramco. In fact, talks about all that we are doing to do renewable energy. They sent 100 people at COP27 to interrupt the discussion around, global warming at all. People there would be people. They won't work under greed alone will bring green. So as long as this technology brings the cost down, where they say that American level of consumption can be afforded in $250. That's technologically possible, by the way. There is not a time to discuss this. Technology has today made it possible that American can be lived in $250 for everybody on earth. Not the 6 people owning 50% of the world GDP. That's a world which is basically Western consumerism driven.
There is a lot of, there's questions coming, Eka, about, again, that at the individual level, what this one.
Yes.
So this is a brilliant way of looking at the business.
So by the way, you need to know that I'm a tech dinosaur. So I have huge respect for what Rajiv ji says, because half the times I'm struggling with it, most times. But I'll again bring it down to me, mine and mankind, my dharma, my karma, my relationship with myself, right? If we start from there. So, okay, first of all, I'm going to ask you the question, what is consumption? So if I asked you today, what did you consume? What's the answer I'm going to get?
It would be food, electricity, petrol, air.
See?
Yes, sir.
And those are still just things that you consumed visibly.
Yeah.
About what we consume. We have 5 senses. We see, we eat, we see, we touch, we taste, we hear, we feel.
Yeah.
We eat, we think. There are 7 senses by which you consume. So
all kinds of ahar.
So conscious consumption is not only in the context of what we eat or the economic or the resources we utilize, but also, and it goes back to our relationship with our own selves. What do we respect ourselves enough for, right? So if you consume violence on TV, if you see violence, though that's the shruti, that's the processing that's happening, those are the visual cues and memories you're creating for yourself. So what you read, touch, taste, feel, you eat junk food, you are junk. And by the way, this is the first principle. I've always believed that in technology, in creating technology, we've actually been our far truer human selves. So garbage in, garbage out works for technology. Perfect doesn't work for us. We've actually been truer to ourselves. Therefore, everything that you input into your body, into your mind, into your intellect, it needs to have conscious consumption. So for instance, in my house, we've stopped newspapers forever. Why have we stopped it? Because I truly believe that they are just selling screens. And I've come to the notion that, so the whole thing is, so therefore, will you hide under a cave? I said, no, if the news trusts the universe, that if the news is important enough to reach you, it will. And that's actually the principle on which I operate now. Right? So what I read, what I eat, what I think, how I travel. So for instance, I've actually given up jewelry during COVID completely. And I've given up jewelry not because I don't like gold or jewelry. I think it's beautiful, but because of the stress it was placing on my mind of कौन सी पहननी है, कब पहननी है, कितनी सुंदर लग रही है, और फिर तो Facebook और Instagram marketing भी इतनी होती है. So I actually went against that because I am responsible for what I eat, think, believe. Right? So, and that then expands itself further. That makes the whole idea of sustainability, oneness, so real and tangible, because it starts with me, it ends with me, and it is in every action that I do, every word I speak, every thought I have. So then there's no counterpart, then there's just you and yourself playing a game with your own self. And if you sort that out, everything else falls into place. Does that make sense in terms of?
It does. It makes a lot of sense, and I think we are close to time, so I should say that you've been such a wonderful panel, and so nicely you've navigated. Rajiv ji on one side spoke about the organizational and the larger 30,000 feet way of looking at the whole thing, businesses, ecosystem, the world. And Eka, you kept on speaking about at the individual level, how do I translate it? How can it get any better than this? So thank you so much for coming on. And why don't you just take 30 seconds, any parting thoughts that you have, and then we'll close the session and hand it over back to Upasana to take it onwards from there, Upasana. Yes, Rajiv.
I would just like to end basically, that, well, there is a new global consciousness that's emerging because of, and technology of the age defines the consciousness. So this time it's defining a consciousness towards regenerativity and restoration, first of all, which is an imperative. And therefore we will have to necessarily kind of, understand the context of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That's what my basic premise is. And as the beautiful question that was put, in fact, about the context of consumption. Now, basically, that's economically driven. Unfortunately, the decisions at the current level also would be driven by economics. And that's, fortunately, economics is in our favor. There is an alternative economics which is being talked about, not alternative capitalism, but kind of, modifying capitalism to suit the needs of shareholder to stakeholder. So that's going to be, but possibly there could be a possibility that instead of NASDAQ, we should have SUSDAQ, Sustainability DAQ. So that's the only way. And if that comes in a thought, I think that only will establish Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We will follow the earth in its true spirit and letter. And that's the only way to salvation. Otherwise, we are
fantastic.
doomed.
And we really
created possibilities. There are possibilities, yes, we can still rise above and we can still regenerate the earth. But the point is that the choice is ours. If we don't make the choices, as they say, there is no free will here on earth. We are always, the moment we are born, we are slaves of time, space.
So Rajiv, we have a request. We have a request that you need to complete your book from being human resource to being human. and let us lay our hands on that, because I think there's a lot of insights which many of us over here missed out, especially on the technology piece. I would really look forward to that. So it's just to tell the
No,
audience.
that's true. So
Yes,
basically,
so
you
there's
you
a
have to
book we
follow
are
that.
expecting.
Yes, and I think
Great.
that's good. I think it might come out in the month of June or July. So I'll let
We'll look
everybody-
forward to it. And you know you have a ready audience for the book. And so it's the same with Eka also. Eka has written, you've already published, it's in the market right now, Eka?
No, it's gone into publishing. So we should release it around June, July. But
Okay.
we'll build it up around Navdurga. So it's actually called Goddess in the Boardroom.
Yes.
Which is
So
exactly this.
So just last
Great.
word, in fact, spirituality and, secularism, which we said that, there is no difference, as Sister Nivedita said in her introduction to complete works of Swami Vivekananda, that the difference between secular and spiritual just vanishes away. When Vivekananda said that, and somebody asked her, in fact, that, I've understood your philosophy, Vivekananda sir. The point is that everything is God. He said, no, I never taught such a philosophy. In fact, God only is, everything else is not. And that's the way, in fact, to understand the reality of the world. God alone is, nothing is there other than that. So the snake is where the rope is, basically. That's important.
So there is that one after
my God, that was
absolutely.
Great. So thank you so much. And I don't think I have anything more to add to this exquisite, amazing panel that we had today. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. So thank you so much. Dhanyavad for that. Before the others do that, I have to do my bit first. Upasna, over to you.
Swapna, and thank you, the audience. I think that's wonderful.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely an enlightened audience. And I think we had so much want of time. Otherwise, this chat is so full of such inquisitive questions, so much of curiosity, and so much of wisdom available within this. Yes, thank you so much.
What a beautiful question. Thank you so much. And let me take the honor to Dhanyavad all the people who are part of the Sammelan. So let me start with thanking Praful, Rajesh, Amita, Tejal, who are the founding members of Chiranjeev Gurukul. Through Chiranjeev Gurukul and through the members of Chiranjeev Gurukul, we have formed Chiranjeev Gurukul community, which lead amazing initiatives. Sammelan is one of such initiatives, which is led by our very favorite Aditi. Aditi, thanks a lot. You have been an amazing leader. She has conceptualized the entire concept of this entire Sammelan, and it's beautiful. It shaped up really beautifully, Aditi. Thank you for your leadership at this space. I would like to thank our very audience. They were very participative and the questions were amazing, and the comments, thank you for encouraging comments. It will encourage us to come up with more beautiful and more thoughtful topics. And to our panelists, Swapnalekha, thank you so much for giving us this beautiful understanding of what is diversity, what is inclusion, what is equity in a very simpler way. And what do I say about Ekaji and Rajivji? Raji, I think from what I understood very powerfully is dharma and the three dharma that are mentioned in our Shastra. Also from Rajivji, everyone loved this, from egocentric to ecocentric. We should move our thought process from egocentric to ecocentric, and I think it is a very powerful terminology that you have given. What I am going to take away is ask right questions. Uttam, if you can help me.
Uttam Prashna.
Adham Adhikari, Madhyam Adhikari, or Uttam Adhikari. Confirmatory, clarificatory, and curiosity.
Yeah, so basically always ask curious questions rather than asking very simple questions. Of course, they are important, but to take the humanity ahead, always have a curious mind. Rajivji, and also what we have to take away is conscious consumption, not of just what we eat and what we wear, but what we hear, what we see, what we feel, everything. And Rajivji, I think one thing is restorative and regenerative. This point stayed with me and it was beautiful. And of course, there is no other way but Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam for humans to exist. Earth will and the nature will exist anyway. But for
Right.
us to exist, we have to come back to the basics.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much. I think Aditi have a point to add, so over to you, Aditi.
No, I just wanted to add my deepest gratitude to Rajesh ji for introducing me to Rajiv ji and Eka ji, because I have heard so many great things about both of you, and it was so great just speaking to you to put this session together. And so thank you for that. And also just to add, I know a lot of people dropped in the chat a lot of questions about what are the actionables to take away. Of course, Upasana summarized this beautifully, but I think one thing we have to take away that stayed with me, what Eka ji said, is that you have to be true to yourself. You have to be conscious about what you want, what means to you. So at Chiranjeev Gurukul, one thing that I have learned is Swadhyay, reflection, because we won't know our actionables without sitting with our thoughts, thinking, and of course, processing all that we have learned today. So that's just what I wanted to add. Thank you so much. And over to you, Upasana.
Okay, thank you for that time. I miss thanking Meenakshi, who handles our entire technical and administrative support, and Vinaya, who summarizes the entire concept of Sammelan and puts in on one document, and it's at one place for everyone to read through whenever required. Thank you to them and the entire Chiranjeev Gurukul community, of course. We will be having our Sammelans every second Thursday of the month. So please mark your calendar accordingly. And we will do our closing Shanti mantra to summarize the entire session. So I request everyone to please close your eyes. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Dhanyavad everyone.
Thanks, everyone.